All right, so we're diving deep again today, and this time we're tackling China. China's economic rise. We've got a ton of research and analyses, even some cool anecdotes about electric vehicles and those apps you see everyone using,
Oh, yeah.
and a whole lot more.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. It is. It's a complicated story. It's got its twists and turns, but super important, I think, for everyone to wrap their heads around. What's so interesting to me is just a decade ago, China was really seen as kind of an imitator in the market.
Right.
And now they're leading in a lot of sectors, look at electric vehicles. They're making more than the rest of the world combined now.
It's incredible, yeah.
And get this, 4 out of the top 5 most downloaded apps here in the US, they're Chinese.
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty wild.
It is wild.
Yeah.
So to help us unpack all this, we've got our expert here who's been following China's economic, everything for years now.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, China's story, economically, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, a few decades ago, they were known for just churning out low-value goods, clothes, textiles,
Right.
basic stuff. And now they're this global powerhouse. Tech, advanced manufacturing, you name it.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. What were some of the things that really allowed them to grow like this?
Well, you got to look at the role of the state.
Yeah.
Government stepping into the market. I know that can be kind of a
Touchy subject?
touchy subject for some people. But in China's case, it hasn't been about the government suppressing the market. It's been more about strategically orchestrating things.
Okay.
They do this thing, centralized planning, but then they let local governments handle the implementation.
So could you break that down a bit? What's that actually look like in practice?
Yeah. So basically, the central government sets these big long-term goals. Let's say we want to dominate renewable energy. Right. And then they give local governments the framework, the resources. But the local governments have some flexibility in how they actually make it happen in their regions, their industries. So you've got this national direction, but also local innovation.
It's not just like a top-down, everyone do this the same way kind of approach.
No, not at all. It's more about, here's the vision. Now you figure out how to make it work where you are.
Sure.
And we've seen some really amazing successes with that. Look at electric vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just making EVs like crazy. They've got this massive network of charging stations, millions of them across the country.
Millions. Wow.
Yeah. Talk about commitment to
Dominating the market.
Yeah, dominating the EV market.
Yeah.
And that's really a great example of how China approaches economic development. They think long-term, they make these strategic investments, and they're playing the long game.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, right? We've seen some reports, a real decline in foreign direct investment, FDI.
Yeah.
What's causing that and how worried should we be?
Yeah, FDI is definitely down. And that's partly because, well, the global economy is uncertain. There's geopolitical stuff going on.
Right.
But there are also internal things going on. China's being more selective. They don't want just any investment anymore. They want quality. They want sustainable investment. Investments that actually align with those long-term goals we were talking about.
So it's not really weakness then. It's more of a strategic recalibration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although it does come with its own challenges, right? Less FDI could slow down growth, and they really got to make sure their own innovation can fill that gap.
It's a tough balancing act.
It is a tough balancing act. And then on top of all that, you've got these cultural shifts happening too.
Yeah.
We've seen some reports about a real generational divide in China. Younger people with different values, different spending habits than the older generation. How's all that going to play into the future of their economy? I think that generational divide is a really key factor to consider. The older generation, they went through some rough times economically, so they're all about saving, being secure. But the millennials, Gen Z, they grew up in a more prosperous China.
Right.
They're more about spending. They want experiences. They want to show off their status. They want brands that match their values.
So it's moving from a saving culture to a spending culture, especially with those younger consumers.
Exactly. And that means businesses operating in China, they have to really understand what these young people want because they're the ones driving the trends in everything. Fashion, tech, even sustainable products.
So companies need to be on their toes, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
And it's not even just about keeping up. It's about knowing what's next. Because in China, things change so fast. What's hot today might be old news tomorrow.
And that brings us back to, China moving from imitation to innovation.
Yeah.
How did they pull that off so quickly?
Well, a lot of factors play into it, but one of the biggest has got to be their massive domestic market, over 1.4 billion people. That's like a giant testing ground for new ideas, new products.
Right.
They can experiment, try things out, and then scale things up way faster than most other countries can even dream of.
It's like a built-in innovation incubator.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big reason why they're leading now in things like AI, 5G, e-commerce. They're not just following trends anymore, they're setting them.
It's pretty amazing, this transformation. It really makes you rethink China's role, globally.
It does. They're not just a manufacturing hub anymore. They're a source of innovation, a driver of global trends. And I think anyone who wants to deal with China, whether it's for business, policy, even just understanding the world, they need to understand this.
Absolutely. So we're seeing this interplay, economic policies, technology, cultural shifts. It's all still unfolding. And it has big implications for the whole world, I think.
It does. And as we dig deeper into this whole rise of China thing, it's good to remember this is just one chapter in a much bigger story.
Fair. There are going to be challenges ahead, but also tons of opportunities.
Yeah.
And the more we understand about how China got here, the better we'll be able to navigate what comes next.
Well said. Why don't we take a pause here, reflect on what we've covered so far, and then we'll jump into the next layer of all this.
We've been talking about how China's economic landscape is always changing, and I think one of the most obvious areas you see is sustainability.
Yeah.
Even just a few years back, they didn't seem too worried about the environment. Growth was all that mattered. But now things are really shifting. Both the government and everyday people are starting to think differently.
So tell me more about that shift. What's
Yeah.
behind this sudden focus on sustainability?
Well, a lot of it comes down to people realizing that rapid industrialization, it comes at a cost, environmentally speaking.
Right.
China's had some real problems. Pollution, air and water, deforestation, resources getting depleted.
Yeah.
And those aren't just abstract problems anymore. They're actually affecting people's lives, how they make a living. So there's a real sense of urgency now. Like, things have got to change.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that sense of urgency, it's even stronger among the younger generation, those millennials and Gen Z folks we talked about earlier. They're way more environmentally conscious. They want sustainable products, practices, and they're holding businesses accountable.
It's like they're not just consumers anymore. They're activists pushing for change.
Yeah, you could say that. They're using their wallets to support brands that share their values. And they're not afraid to call out companies on social media for bad environmental practices.
So businesses are getting the message, I guess. Are they actually making changes?
We are seeing some good signs. More companies going green, adopting sustainable practices, investing in green tech, even bragging about their environmental efforts.
Right.
But I got to say, it's still early days. There's still a lot of greenwashing going on. Companies just making surface-level changes so they look eco-friendly without really committing to anything substantial.
So we got to be a little skeptical then.
Oh, definitely. You got to look past the marketing hype. What are their actual practices? What about their supply chains? What's their real environmental footprint? That's where transparency and accountability come in.
And how's China handling those things? Transparency, accountability, especially with their political system, it seems like that could be tricky.
It's definitely a tough area, no doubt about it. There's a history of secrecy in China. Information, especially environmental data, hasn't always been easy to come by. But there have been some positive steps. The government's realizing that to build trust and get companies to behave responsibly, they need more transparency. They're tightening environmental regulations, requiring companies to be more open with information, and even making more data available to the public.
So slow progress, but at least it's moving in the right direction.
I'd say so, yeah. More and more people are getting that transparency isn't just about following the rules. It's about making things fair for everyone, encouraging innovation, and ultimately achieving that sustainable development we've been talking about.
Sustainable development, that seems to be the big idea behind a lot of China's current economic strategy.
Right.
Is it just a reaction to the environmental pressures, or is there something more to it?
Well, the environmental pressures are definitely a big part of it, but it's also about trying to rebalance the economy, moving away from that old model where growth was everything, no matter the cost. Now they're focusing more on quality of life, social equity, environmental sustainability, building an economy that can actually last.
So it's about being more holistic, more resilient in the long run.
Exactly. And we're actually seeing this shift reflected in some of their big policy initiatives. Take renewable energy, for example. They're investing heavily in it. They want to be the global leader in solar and wind power. And they're pushing for a circular economy where resources are used more efficiently and there's less waste.
Those are some pretty ambitious goals. What are some of the roadblocks they're hitting trying to actually make those things happen?
Honestly, one of the biggest challenges is just inertia. I mean, for decades, China's economy was all about heavy industry, manufacturing, pulling stuff out of the ground, changing to a more sustainable model. That means basically restructuring their whole economy.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask. There are people who benefit from the way things are now, and they're going to resist change.
So they're walking a tightrope, trying to encourage these new industries, but also making sure the people who depend on the old ways aren't left behind.
That's exactly it. And then you got to remember how huge and diverse China is. Different regions have different strengths, different environmental problems, different levels of, let's say, enthusiasm for change.
Sounds like a massive undertaking, a lot of coordination and collaboration needed.
Absolutely. And it's still a work in progress. There are wins and losses along the way, and sometimes it's not even clear what the best path forward is.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure. China's committed to this idea of a more sustainable future. And what they do is going to have a huge impact, both on the global economy and the environment.
That makes me wonder, if they pull this off, if they actually transition to a more sustainable model, could that influence other countries too? Maybe even set a new standard for sustainability worldwide?
It's definitely a possibility. China's a big player, both in terms of size and influence. If they can prove that sustainable development isn't just a nice idea, but that it actually makes economic sense, other countries might start to follow their lead.
So they could actually become a leader in sustainability, not just with technology and investments, but by changing what the whole world expects and sees as normal.
Absolutely. And that's an idea that's got people all over the world feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety, because it raises some big questions about China's role globally. Their values, what they want to achieve, even how willing they are to work with other countries on these shared problems we all face.
It's a good reminder that China's economic rise, it's not just about the numbers, it's about a whole shift in global power dynamics. New players are stepping up and they're changing the rules of the game.
That's right. And if we want to understand how to deal with the complexities of the 21st century, we've got to understand those dynamics. Because like it or not, what China does is going to affect all of us.
That's a great point. This has been really eye-opening, this whole look into China's rise. As we get ready to wrap things up, I'm curious, what about the future? What are some of the big trends, the potential scenarios we should be watching out for as China keeps moving forward with this economic transformation?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, this incredible journey of China's economy, the bumps in the road, the whole sustainability thing. But where do things go from here? What's the next chapter for this economic giant? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Well, one thing that really jumps out at me is the whole domestic consumption angle. That's going to keep growing, be a major engine for their growth. More and more Chinese citizens are entering the middle class. They've got money to spend, and they want more and better stuff. And that's going to impact not just China, but the global market too. So companies, if they want a piece of that pie, they really got to understand what Chinese consumers want these days.
Exactly. Chinese consumers, they're getting more sophisticated. It's not just about having stuff anymore. They want brands that reflect their values, give them unique experiences, help them project the image they want. It's not enough to just take existing products and tweak them for the Chinese market. Companies need to get creative, come up with stuff specifically designed for these new consumers.
And that ties into the whole innovation push, right? China's investing a ton in these cutting-edge technologies, AI, biotech, renewable energy. Why is that such a priority for them?
Well, I think part of it is just about staying competitive. They know that if they want to be a major player in the 21st century global economy, they got to be on the cutting edge of technology. But it's also about national pride. They want to be seen as a leader, not just economically, but scientifically, technologically. They want to be the ones driving innovation, not just following along.
And they're definitely making moves. The Chinese companies are becoming global players in 5G, electric vehicles, e-commerce. How are they doing it so fast?
Well, for one thing, they're not afraid to try new things. They'll experiment, invest in ideas that might not work out. They're not afraid to fail and learn from their mistakes. That creates a really dynamic environment, perfect for innovation. And then there's the data. China has so much data. 1.4 billion people, a society that's going digital super fast. It's like a gold mine for training algorithms, developing new technologies, understanding consumer behavior.
So data is the new oil, and China's got the biggest reserves.
You could say that. And Western companies and governments are starting to realize they need to step up their game if they want to keep up. They need access to that data and the know-how to use it effectively.
This makes me think about the whole China-West dynamic. Can these two economic powerhouses work together, or are we heading for a clash of the titans?
It's tough to say, really. There are definitely areas where cooperation makes sense, like climate change, pandemics, global issues that affect everyone. But then there are areas where competition is inevitable. Technology, geopolitical influence, those are going to be battlegrounds.
So it's probably going to be a bit of both, right? Working together sometimes, going head to head other times. And to navigate that, we really need to understand what drives China, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that China isn't a monolith. There are different voices within the government, the business world, even among ordinary people. Understanding those different perspectives is crucial if we want to figure out how to engage with them effectively.
This deep dive has been so insightful. As we wrap up, what are the big takeaways you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think the main thing is this. China's story is still being written. It's a story of ambition, resilience, and constant change. And it's a story that's going to affect all of us, no matter where we live and what we do. So stay curious, stay informed, and be ready for a future where China plays a bigger and bigger role on the world stage.
That's a great point. Thanks so much for taking this journey with us. We hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives on China and maybe even inspired you to dig a little deeper on your own.